The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
Welcome to Access Now TV, on location, and I'm here with Les, and we're at T&D Amisk Camp.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Absolutely, T&D Amisk Camp, and welcome back, Cole. I really looking forward to spending some time with you. Welcome you to back to T&D Amisk Camp and to Beaver City Tours.
I can't wait. So we tell the people that we're here just outside of Denair Beach. Mm-hmm. Or is this considered Denair Beach?
Well, it's south of Denair Beach, but we're still on Amisk Lake, or a lot of people still refer to it as Beaver Lake here in this part of the country. So we're on the shores on the southeast corner of Amisk Lake, and it's a beautiful location.
And I must admit, like the first time that I actually did some history here was with you. And you took us through the museum and told us so much, and it was just fascinating, you know.
Yeah.
Especially that little ornament, that not ornament, device they pulled out of the lake. That nobody does anyone know what that thing is still?
Our mystery artifact still hasn't been identified.
Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right.
I gotta see that. Okay,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
Today you have a special segment. Now, I didn't know this, but according to what you said, this was the only gold rush to ever happen in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, this was Saskatchewan's very first and only gold rush community, established in 1912, became really a major gold rush with prospectors coming here from all over Canada to find gold, and the huge influx of prospectors was probably in about 1913, and so we usually have a bit of an introduction, just talk about some of the history of the site here at the lodge, and then we will take a boat over to the other side of the river here, and then we'll walk on to the land and spend some time talking about what was there in 1912, 1914, and some of the stories that go with that. Some of the real people, the people that actually made Beaver City what it was then and what we're trying to preserve now.
And people can go on this tour?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us how they can contact you, and I'll put that throughout the show.
Yeah, absolutely. People, I have a Beaver City Tours Facebook page, as well as my phone number. They can call 1-306-688-0810, and they can book tours through me by calling that number. And we've got a good number of tours lined up this summer. There's actually been a really good response. There's a good number of people that have been aware, primarily locally here, they've been aware of the history of Beaver City and what it meant. It predates everything that we have around here. Beaver City was a going concern long before Flin Flon or Creighton or Denair Beach existed, so it predates everything around here. And as a matter of fact, is probably the prospecting that was happening on Beaver Lake is actually probably what led to the prospecting going on at Flin Flon.
Oh, in the copper mine.
The copper discovery, yeah.
Yes, and
absolutely.
They're also, as far as I know, they're still looking for gold.
Oh, there's always prospecting going on. There's some active mineral exploration. We call it, today is mineral exploration up on the north west corner of Amisk Lake, and yeah, you bet, they're still looking for gold.
Wow. Yeah, because we did see Jerry Angel took us to see some core samples and that they were drilling, and Yeah, everyone's looking, right?
Absolutely.
I have a question before you go any further. When you said people came here to kind of strike it rich, was there any particular person who did, hit the big time, as opposed to, say, a company or an organization of sorts?
We don't think that there was anybody who actually hit the mother lode and actually took a whole lot of gold out of there in the first wave of the gold rush. I think the people that probably made the most money at that time were probably the entrepreneurs who set up boarding houses and cook shacks, places for people to get meals and lodging. There was a promoter and a financial backer from Prince Albert by the name of Jack Hamill, and he established one of the businesses over there, the Amisk Hotel. So I think by and large it was actually the people who provided services and facilities who made the money initially.
Kind of like Vegas.
That was about the extent of that.
So there was a hotel there?
Yeah, the Amisk Lake Hotel. Yeah,
oh, wow.
We have a sign and we have some photographs that. Fortunately, we have four very archival photographs that were taken by a Royal Northwest Mounted Police officer, and they show an awful lot of the detail of what was actually there.
Wow. And this is all 100 years ago, eh?
Yeah, it's 111 years ago now that these photographs were taken in 1914, and they depict the businesses that were there, and all sorts of detail in terms of people who were there and how they lived, how they created a life.
So that's the location right there. That segment?
That's correct. Yeah, that we've identified where that is, just directly across the river from T&D Amisk Camp.
Oh, nice. And so, how did somebody ever find the first, nugget or
Well, those prospectors, and I don't have a lot of information about how prospecting works, but they were able to find gold in 1910, which there were prospectors who came up from Prince Albert, and they would follow the Saskatchewan River system, and they eventually made their way up through Cumberland House into the Sturgeon Weir River, and then onto what was traditionally called Beaver Lake. And so, by way of, pickaxes and prospecting tools, they looked for signs of gold veins, and primarily the gold is in the rocks. It's not per se the type of gold that runs in gravel beds that you might remember from the stories about the Klondike. There was a lot of free gold is what's referred to there.
So they knew what they were looking for, sort of like geological features that said it could be here, as opposed to just randomly, you think how big Canada is, just randomly picking spots and
yeah, exactly. There were some pretty experienced prospectors, and obviously a good number of what you might term greenhorns as well. But they were pretty active, and in the search of gold was big. This gold play or gold rush in Saskatchewan, started in 1910. The height was 1913. And it wasn't very far after, or very long after, the Klondike gold rush that happened in 1897, 1898. So the time frame, was pretty close. People had remembered a lot of gold stories from the Klondike. We're hoping that that's exactly what they were going to find here at Beaver Lake, and that's where Beaver City started.
Wow, that is so interesting. I can't believe I'm going to see this. Did you yourself ever find any gold?
No, I've never been a prospector, and I don't have any real experience at looking for gold veins or gold itself. I wish I did.
It seems like a lot of work. Yeah, especially if you're just going to get maybe something that you have to like the ore, right?
Yeah.
You've got to process that.
They still have to process it, yeah.
All right. Well, anything else that you wanted to mention on here?
No, I think we'll go over to the other side, and then we'll look at some of the remnants of the community and talk about who lived there, some of the people that made their lives, and so on there. And we'll be back to the lodge in a while.
Sure. And just before we do go, let's talk just briefly about T&D Amos Camp. Now, I did an interview with Cindy a couple times, and this is a fantastic place. And so how did this come to be? Was this part of anything to do with the gold rush? This area, this like launch pad?
No, this camp was originally started in the late 1950s, developed in the 1960s from some of the history that I remember. And so this was more related to some of the development that was happening in terms of roads that were connecting communities such as Flin Flon and Nipawin. There was the highway that comes here really was the main reason why the camp was built here on Amos Lake.
Oh, and so how many cabins do they have here?
They've got a total of 10 cabins, and very, very busy
out here. Yes. And you're open all year round?
Yes.
Yes, Cindy says yes. And it's very, very beautiful, very rustic, and yeah, just check it out here. Lots of fishing, hunting. Yeah, doing your own thing. T&D Amos Camp. Well, that was a nice, beautiful ride and didn't take very long at all.
No, it's very close. We just come right across the mouth of the river, the Sturgeon Weir River, and I like to take a few minutes just to sort of talk about what was here in 1910 or 1912 when people were prospecting, looking for gold, when the gold rush was on. If we think back to those years, the Sturgeon Weir River and the Saskatchewan River were all part of a great travel way. And if we sort of forget about Flin Flon, forget about Denier Beach and Creighton, because they didn't exist at that time. The two big centers of activity or commerce were the Pas, Manitoba, and Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And the significant thing about those two is that they both had, in 1910, they both had railways. So they were both considered to be sort of end of steel communities. And so whenever there was some industrial development or prospecting and a gold strike, people came up here with canoes. There were very limited motorized boats, but they spent a lot of time in canoes. And there had been York boats up in this area as well, and we'll talk about York boats a little bit more at one of the stops on the tour.
Wow. Okay, so when you're talking about like let's say the Pas, was that primarily a fur trading post at one time? Is that how that kind of got started?
Yeah, the Pas had a huge role in the fur trade. Also because there was an interest in running a railroad up to the port of Churchill or the port of Port Nelson at one time. So it grew quite rapidly. Plus the First Nations people had lived in that area, so there was a lot of community there already from the Opaskwayak Cree Nation. And these waterways were also, as much as they were used by people when it came to the fur trade, going back to the 1700s, these waterways were actually the highways for Indigenous people going back centuries. We have artifacts that have been found just across the river on Limestone Point, and those tools and those points and potteries have been dated back to 6,000 and 8,000 years. So this area was traveled well before any of the fur traders from the Hudson's Bay Company or from the Northwest Company ever showed up.
Wow. I mean, it's just beautiful to know how historic this area is.
It's very historic.
Fantastic. And you're just like loaded with history. You love that, don't you?
I do absolutely love history, and I guess maybe that's why I have a role with the Northern Gateway Museum at Dinair Beach as well. So a lot of the history is part of what we record, and we we make it available for people to appreciate the history and to learn more. It's all about learning.
And was Dinair Beach basically a vacation spot for Flin Flon?
It became the playground for Flin Flon when it was established in 1930-31. A lot of the people who already lived in Flin Flon wanted a place to get away. It was always known as a beautiful sand beach. It had that kind of a resort quality, which it still has a very much a resort quality.
Yeah, and you can visit this place year-round, fishing, hunting, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Boating.
Yeah, just
Swimming.
Recreation.
Yeah,
Canoeing, paddling. There's a lot of recreational paddling that happens on the Sturgeon Way River and on Amisk Lake.
Yeah, so basically, folks, just one quick email off to Les or T&D Amisk Camp, and they'll hook you up.
Yeah, we appreciate partnering with T&D Amisk Camp, absolutely. But these tours wouldn't be happening without T&D Amisk Camp.
Yeah, they're very close, so that's a good thing. Okay, you want to take us on a journey? I'll try to film you while I try not to break my neck.
Yeah, and watch because on the trail there's like those little stumps and stuff, you know, that you have to watch out.
So is this an island?
This is the mainland here.
Oh,
we're on the mainland.
Okay, so it is possible to get attacked by wild animals.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I know one day I'm going to get my wish. Although it might just be a groundhog or a squirrel, but whatever. No, I make people in the audience that know, how many shows I've done here. I always ask these wilderness people up here if they've ever been attacked by a wild animal, and the answer's been no. I think they're just smarter. You guys know what to avoid. You know how to not startle. I don't know.
Most people do. They do have a lot of caution.
More people in Winnipeg have been attacked by bears.
Yeah.
Well, outside of Winnipeg, but not far. Wow, So was this the main trail then?
Well, this was because it was quite a well worn path here. We think that this was one of the main accesses from what was in a community down to the lake here. They may have had docks. They certainly pulled up boats there. So when people come on a tour to Beaver City, we do like to have a bit of an introduction when we get onto the site. And we're very close here to what was actually Main Street, Beaver City. And this 1914 photograph actually shows what was actually here. And here's Jack Hamill's Amisk Lake Hotel. It's actually one of only 5 archival photographs that exist that show what actually was here in 1914. Many people also they wonder, or they think that actually this is actually where the gold was here at Beaver City, but no, this really wasn't. This was just a place. It was a convenient place that we'll learn a little bit more about, where they could bring goods and people and establish a base of operations where they could house people, feed people. And there was in the neighborhood of 1,000 prospectors and gold seekers who showed up here by 1913.
Man.
This map actually shows, it's a 1914 prospecting map, and it actually shows we are down at the very south tip of Amisk Lake, and it's a huge lake.
Oh, it is.
It's huge, and I mean the gold claims, all of the prospecting claims were up at the north end, and that was like 25 or 30 miles north of here. We have to clock that one of these days, but it's a long ways north. So anybody that was actually here providing services, it was for people who were still going further north. And they may have had their own camps, their own prospecting camps in that location, because they would have spent days, weeks, perhaps even months up there. But they would come back to Beaver City to reprovision and to spend time with the people here.
Like you say, maybe that's where people made the most money, was just selling stuff to fulfill a dream.
That's right. It was a dream. Gold rushes are a real attraction to people that have dreams of striking it rich. In 1913, one of the more famous prospectors was Tom Creighton, which the town of Creighton is named after him. And he, as well as Jack and Dan Mosher and Leon and Isidore Dion, were the ones who found free gold on the northwest shore. And so there was definitely way more activity and more excitement when that happened.
Free gold, just that means like it's just like
free
nuggets?
Gold was just in the water beds.
Oh wow, that's when you would use the pan then.
Then you would pan for gold.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do people still do that? Is there any area around that is somewhat lucrative for panning?
People have gone up to the old mine site, because there still actually is some remnants of the mine that was there in 1913, 14, and they do try panning along the shoreline there. Okay. And I've never heard of anybody
getting
actually
the tailings.
finding. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In the waste rock. There's a lot of waste rock that came out of the shafts that were dug into the ore vein, and so there's always a chance of finding gold.
That that's a dream for some people, even to just come and try it for an afternoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
So we'll continue on down to we'll be onto the main street of Beaver City shortly.
The main street. So yeah, up to 1,000 people, huh?
Yeah.
That's incredible. And yeah, like if nobody was carrying on this tradition like you are, of showing, some of the historic examples of, living history. Yeah, who would know this existed?
Well, we're trying to make history come alive by actually giving people an opportunity to come out and see it, because as much as maybe has been written in a few different stories, a few different newspaper articles, it's very seldom that people come to this site, because it is so remote. And we do like sharing history.
No, absolutely. And there, like we said earlier, there's so much to do here that it's worth the drive alone if people haven't seen, the Precambrian shield here up north.
Yeah.
It really, around the paw, it just starts to change. So is this...
We are literally on Main Street, Beaver City.
This is Main Street, Beaver City. So is this owned by anyone in particular?
No, this is vacant Crown land. It's considered to be public land, and it hasn't been put under any sort of legal protection. So it's open to the public.
Okay. So we'd advise, at least I'll advise anyone watching this, don't take anything, don't leave anything.
No, to do any archaeological work, and there has been some archaeological work done here, but you do have to have a permit from the ministry to conduct any sort of collecting or doing any experimental digging or anything like that here.
Okay, so yeah,
so
that's
we just observe. Now this sign depicts what was here in 1914 in one of the buildings. We actually aren't even sort of close to where we think we might find the remnants of this building, but it was in 1914 the Royal Northwest Mounted Police decided that they should have a presence here. And it was probably similar to what the RCMP or the Northwest Mounted Police thought when the Klondike Gold Rush was on in the Yukon. They very quickly realized that they needed to maintain law and order. And so there was a good number of law enforcement people that went up there. So following between 1897, 1898, when the Klondike Gold Rush was on, 1914 was not a whole lot longer after that. So the law enforcement people already knew that they should have a presence here. So they built this detachment building, and you can see their sign. We're very fortunate to have these photographs. And a number of years ago, the town of Creighton established a replica building. It's a museum sitting next to the Creighton Tourism Office, and there is a lot of artifacts or a lot of historical information at that museum. People would like to stop there.
Cool, that's good to know. Yeah, you know, I mean, the police have to be everywhere, you know, at any, or, you know, they try to be anywhere. And this is like in the middle of nowhere.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you can imagine that there's all sorts of schemes, and there's all sorts of ways to make quick money, and some of it's legal and some of it's not legal, and that's why the law enforcement gets involved.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Now we're still on what you would call Main Street, Beaver City, and we have the remnants of a building there that we are quite sure is this building here. This was quite a substantial log structure, and in 1914, the Justice of the Peace Robertson had a location here, and he held court here at Beaver City. When there were actually charges of lawlessness laid. And so we do have the remnants, and this is basically all that's left after 111 years is this, and I don't know, it's very hard to distinguish, but there's four log walls here that are basically rotted into the earth. In the course of that many years, what happened was that the roof would, of course, give way, and then the logs would start rotting.
Oh, right, yeah.
And there's a cellar in the middle of this one, and that's why this is quite big. But they would have had a cellar to store food, stuffs, and things that they needed to keep unfrozen all winter.
Right, right.
And that's in terms of buildings that were built in the north. That's a huge cellar. And so I'm standing at about where the other corner of the building was. Those logs came down here, and then they followed along to about this corner here.
So predominantly, what kind of lumber would they use that was close?
It would have been spruce or poplar logs, and they may have taken the bark off of them, and some of them they probably didn't take the bark off of, which would have also aided in deterioration.
Makes them rot
They'd
faster.
rot.
Yes, yes.
And the roof would have been perhaps lumber, or it could have been poles, and then moss on top of that. So this is one of the more distinct pieces of evidence of an old building.
Any significance to that pickaxe?
You know, I actually brought it here just as an example of something that that prospectors would use. The tools of the trade. I mean, prospecting was pretty basic. They were looking for signs of all sorts of metals. You know, mineralization, and
Yeah, you figure using that to smack into rock, you wouldn't want to pick a fight with a prospector at the bar.
no, and I mean, this is actually another.
Oh yeah.
This is another tool. This is a prospector's pickaxe, and this is the type of a tool that that those prospectors would have had, and they would have been chipping away at those quartz veins, at some of the other rock outcroppings. But this is certainly the type of tool. We wouldn't leave this here. That type of a pickaxe there was something used for more substantial trenching, let's say.
Yeah, what would you do if you broke one? I guess you just buy another one here. Beaver City, yeah. I mean, I know that a lot of people in Saskatchewan have not heard of this, so, you know, I honestly couldn't be happier to be,
No.
you know, learning about this and bringing it to their attention.
It's one of Saskatchewan's best kept secrets.
It is.
Let's put it that way. There's not a lot of people that have heard of the gold rush on Amisk Lake. We'll go a little further down the trail.
Is there poison ivy in this area?
None that I'm aware of, no.
Oh, okay.
Well, the significance of our stop here is that this is actually the trail ahead of us here is exactly the same trail that was here in 1910, 1912. We've brushed it out a little bit, but the trail leads 17 miles from here to Nameu Lake. There was a place called Beaver Landing right on this place here, at that location, and that 17-mile trail went all the way up to Beaver City, which was right here. And so when a gold rush was on, they knew that they needed to have transportation. The river, the Sturgeon Weir River is a very shallow river, and so a lot of people were shying away from that. It was known as the River Malign, or the Wicked River, and because it was so shallow, it was very, very difficult to get boats up and down, especially like low water years like this year.
Oh, right, yeah.
Really hard to get anything. So people being very ingenious or creative, they decided that this was a good route for a road. And so, in fact, they had horses and wagons that they used to transport people and goods. And again, the significance of the railroad landings or the railroad endings in the Pas, for example, was that they were able to bring boats up the river system to Nameu Lake. And they would have barges that would have wagons, there would be cattle, there would be horses, and they brought those animals here to help freight goods on this 17-mile road. And there were at one time up to 40 horses here to do that work, as there was a lot of people here and they needed to have a lot of food and a lot of equipment. One of the families that lived here at Beaver City was the Hayes family, Florence and Will Hayes, and she, in her memoir, wrote about the time that they first arrived at Beaver City. And in her memoir, she talks about It was about 8 o'clock when we started our trip over the portage, and they would have left from Beaver Landing, and which was just a freshly cut trail through the bush, with here and there a stretch of corduroy over the swampy places. I sat in the wagon with my year-old baby Orville on my knee, my 3-year-old son Derlin beside me, and Mary E., her niece, and her daughter Noni walked along with Will driving the cows. Strange to relate that the young lad driving the team was Bill Grayson, who later became famous for winning dog sled races and later married their daughter Noni. And she talks about having traveled on this trail with horses and a wagon, and she said the sun was starting to go down as we drove down off the rise and sighted our new home next to the rise with the setting sun reflecting on the windows. So if you can imagine this site being relatively clear of trees and them coming over the rise with the horses and wagons and locating their new home, which they lived at till 1919.
Interesting. The fact that there's, you know, this was clear.
This would have been an opening. This would have been a clearing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of these trees. I mean, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess they've had over 100 years to grow back. Eh?
Well, and this is actually one of those other parts of what we are seeing here is actually how well the boreal forest looks after itself. Even in a place that had been a community that had people and buildings and all sorts of activity, the forest has actually retaken itself.
You're right.
Unless you actually found remnants on the ground, you may never know that there was actually a community here. So the boreal forest is very good at coming back. And so this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, you're right. You would never know anything was here,
No.
basically. Oh.
So now these wagons, as pictured in that 1924 photograph from Sturgeon Landing, are exactly the same wagons. People associate wagons and horses with farming, rural activity. Horses were really big in the north when it came to different kinds of developments. And so these wagon wheels were not here. I'll be quite honest with you. These wagon wheels came from Kenora. And there was a...
Kenora, Saskatchewan?
Kenora, Saskatchewan,
okay.
Yes. My hometown. And there was an antique dealer there that happened to have a good selection of wagon wheels. And so I purchased 2 wagon wheels just to represent what transportation was all about in 1912, 1914 in northern Saskatchewan in the Precambrian Shield. That was a pretty rough ride, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. And but I guess the good thing is you could always whittle yourself another spoke.
That's right. You could fix it. That was the rear wheel. That was the front wheel.
Yeah.
They were different sizes.
And they were structurally the same width, weren't they?
They were.
Yeah. And I mean that evolved into trains, and from that goes as far as I know all the way back to the Romans with the chariots.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That technology was the
that
same.
That wheelbase, has been pretty much the same.
Yeah. So we'll head back to another spot.
No, this is great. I would encourage anyone to come out. How long does the tour run in terms of beginning of spring, end of spring, winter, fall?
Well, I've been planning on having the tours during the months of June, July, August, and September.
Okay.
One or 2 days a week.
So you just have to contact him. Just email Les, find out what days he's running. Don't be disappointed, book early.
one of the other aspects, and I forgot to mention when we were here before, was that this area is actually also one of Saskatchewan's best examples of what we would call an old growth forest. Many people think about old growth forests in British Columbia, Alberta, some of the larger areas where forestry is huge. This tree was quite significant in terms of Saskatchewan forest history. This could have been a 50 or 60-year-old tree, because trees do grow fairly slowly here. And that tree was there in 1914. And then these trees grew since 1914. And so this area has not seen a forest fire in probably 150 years.
Oh,
so
okay.
the trees, the forest itself, not only did it repair itself and reclaim itself, it's a really good indication of what can be in an old growth forest.
When was the first time that you came here?
My first trip here to Beaver City was with the Northern Gateway Museum Board in 1993. We came here with an elder by the name of Rod McDermott, who was a longtime resident of Denair Beach. He was quite famous for his work in the community. He also worked for the DNR as a patrolman and a conservation officer. And so Rod knew all of these sites. Rod actually was here in Beaver City as a 6-year-old in 1914. His mother worked at one of the businesses here, so we had the privilege of actually coming here. First-hand account.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he talked about in one of his stories about Beaver City. He was of course a very young child, and they had cattle here, and they had horses, of course. But he said a bull chased him one day, and he barely got away, and he had to run into one of the cabins to get away from this bull. And he said he would never forget that, and I know why.
No kidding. So you can't really say it was a wild animal that attacked him.
No,
I'm still never going to find somebody attacked by a wild animal.
So now here we have the remnants of a very substantial log building.
That's exactly the word I was going to use, was substantial. I mean, that's pretty big.
And we are like 99.9% sure that this outline is this long and narrow Poplar Pleasant boarding house that Will and Florence Hayes had for their business in accommodating gold seekers and prospectors.
Man, so you just come here and go into the boarding house there and pay your fee, have a place to sleep.
Yeah, they could.
They make your food.
They could feed up to 300 men, and they could accommodate about 200 men. Is what we've read in the various accounts. So people came here to replenish their supplies, maybe take the transportation and go south, and also visit people. People lived here.
What do you think a supper would consist of? Like a stew? Soup?
Probably, quite likely, a lot of it was fish.
Okay.
And because they had cattle here, they would have been having the luxury of having some beef.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And there wasn't obviously a lot of farming in the area, so they'd have to import vegetables and stuff if they did.
They would, and that's why the cellars were a really big thing, because if they brought up goods, they had to have a cellar. So that tree's been here for a while. So these log walls were a long ways down here, and we couldn't quite figure out why there was no distinct front wall here until we looked at that picture again and realized that they actually had a veranda. Because again, if you take all of this out of here, or most of these trees out of here, you'd have a beautiful view of the river.
Yes.
And who wouldn't want to sit on their veranda with a coffee in the morning?
Right, and look at that.
Overlooking the Sturgeon Weir River.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
So that's why there's quite likely why there was no rotted log wall here, is because there was no wall here.
So, you know, people watching this, obviously, they can see that we're being infestated by mosquitoes. What did they do back in the day? Because, I mean, we're using chemicals that have been developed over the years. What do you think they did?
I think they had a lot of smudges.
Okay.
People use smudges. If you could create a little bit of smoke, you would get out of that. And I'm not sure, I don't really know of anything else that people would have used back then, because they had to put up with a lot of mosquitoes and horseflies, sandflies.
Yeah.
You get it all here.
Yeah, and then you've got the smudge and you're breathing it in as well.
Then you're breathing in smoke.
And then you go and light your pipe later, and it's maybe why life expectancy wasn't as
great.
Long as it is now. And speaking of Amisk Lake and fish, what are some of the primary fish species that you can catch here?
Right now, it's walleye. The sports fishing is really huge on Amisk Lake, and so walleye and northern pike are the preferred catches. Amisk Lake, or as we call it, Beaver Lake, was also traditionally known as a real fishery, a food fishery, because of the massive whitefish stocks that are in this lake, and so that has made a huge commercial fishery for local people here, and there were lake trout. So lake trout would have been also a real staple on this lake back when they still existed here. Just watch your step. This is a little rough in here. So this is what was termed, when there were some archaeological studies here, this was described as a stone cellar. And this has existed since 1910, 1912. And so what they did was they made use, the people here made use of this natural nook in the rocks, and they built this limestone wall. And we feel that this was probably also a wall here. It's just fallen in. And they would have had a roof over top of it, and then moss on top of that, which you can still see some remnants of that kind of material there. So they would have had logs across here. This appeared to be a fairly rounded log that was probably one of the roof timbers. And then they would have had this moss over top of everything else. And so they would have been able to put up ice, which is a traditional method of keeping food in the summertime. So they would have put up ice and put that in here, and then they could have stored, you know, their butter, their milk from the cows, because they had milking cows here, and that sort of thing.
I find that amazing that the ice would last like almost all summer.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
Yeah, it sure does. People then, traditionally today, people store ice in sawdust.
Okay.
Back then they would have used moss. So they would have just had some pure clean moss from the forest, and they would have packed that around the ice, and it would have kept all summer.
Nice. No, this is fascinating.
So now one of the things, because this was such a nice overlooking spot, and the river, we've been very careful not to disturb the site too much, so we haven't done a lot of clearing for a number of reasons. But if you could picture this as being fairly open, there might have been a few large trees they left, but it would have been a beautiful view of the Sturgeon Weir River, and it would have commanded a view of seeing anybody coming up and down the river, whether they were prospectors or fur traders, some of the indigenous people that lived here, the Cree people from the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation. And Florence Hayes, in one of her memoirs, she talked about York boats. And I'll quote her, "One evening I heard a shout from the children and looked out to see a large York boat being pulled up the river by 10 or 12 Indians. These boats were used very extensively by the Hudson's Bay Company in the early days, and I believe that was the last one that ever came up the Sturgeon River, for in the 5 years there, I never saw another one." So that was really in the dying days of York boat use, and for obvious reasons, because that river is so shallow.
Yeah, and the York boats were, like you say, primarily used like in fur trading and,
Yeah.
you know, Northern Store, Northern Company or whatever, Hudson Bay. Yeah, and, you know, they go all the way, yeah, down to the beginning of Canada, basically, right?
They
Like
do, yeah. And the history of York boats in this area stems from York Factory, and they would have come through the Saskatchewan River system, gotten onto the Sturgeon Weir River system, and up into the Churchill River, and further north into the Athabasca country and the Mackenzie River. So York boats were very important in the north for a number of years.
Yeah, they were like the semis of their, you know, of their time.
They were,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
They carried, you know, I don't know how many people, 10, 16?
Well, there were a crew of eight
Okay.
or nine people who actually manned the oars, and the oars were huge. But that's what they made their way with.
Man, that's fantastic. The idea of portaging too, right? There's what's the name of the town? Is it Cranberry Portage? Do I have that?
Cranberry Portage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, that's where they would stop and move across land.
Yeah, and that's how they had to get on many of the portages that they had to get around on some of the river rapids here. Like for example, in the Sturgeon Weir River, there is a good number of portages, but they would have had log rollers. They would have had rollers on the ground, and then the men basically, through sheer force and strength, they would push and pull these York boats across the portages like that. They would have emptied them by then.
Right.
But that also meant having to carry 10 tons of goods across the portage too. So it wasn't, yeah.
Wow.
The York Boat Brigades, there's a long history of York Boat Brigades in northern Canada. We'll probably head back.
Okay, well, I guess that's bringing us to the end. Can you tell us, as we're closing up here, you know, how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, people can.
Who the guy is behind you that's walking?
Certainly.
That's your sound, man.
You can certainly check my Facebook page for Beaver City Tours. Is a Facebook page, and the phone number to book tours or to contact me if anybody has any questions would be 1-306-688-0810, and I'd be pleased to help anybody come up and take a tour.
Yeah, not only that, but you know, T&D as well.
Yes.
And the museum.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're basically like the king of this lake in a way, you know, like, or at least the half down past Denair.
Well, I have a passion for history, and these are some real gems of our local history, and sometimes long forgotten history is the most interesting.
No, that's fascinating. So once again, thanks so much for taking us on this tour.
Yeah.
You know, I hope that our listeners, viewers have learned a lot, and you know, will come out here. And if they do, you know, I'd like to tell them, you know, mention to Les, hey, you saw this on Access, because that matters, you know.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
take care, all the best, and hopefully we can see you again on our return next year.
Right on. Thank you.
If you'd like to share your feedback on the program you just watched, contact us today